Wasn't very entertaining, but okay.
Everyone ready?
Yes.
All right. It's 5:28 on January 19, 2023. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Then I'm going to turn it over to whoever wants to get started.
Do we need to acknowledge for the minutes who are present?
I think we can. I think all members of both work groups are here and accounted for. Is that-
And maybe for the record, we'll say all the school board's members are here in person. Mr. Browning, Mr. Brown, and all three lawyers from the NAACP side are in person, Ms. Avia, Ms. Dines, and Ms. Haraveld. And then on Zoom, or I'm sorry, on the Teams meeting is Ms. Wall and Ms. Green.
Going to facilitate? So the meeting is called to order. The first item is the consent agenda. So any opportunities to discuss the consent or a motion to approve the consent? I'm going to pull, I think, is that where the minutes are?
Yeah, so
So if we can pull those from the consent agenda to discuss.
you're looking to pull which meetings or which minutes from the consent agenda?
Our previous meeting.
All right, the December 14, 2022 meeting?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Jody, just so you know, I'm going off the last agenda that you sent us as being the one that we would go off. So under item 2, consent agenda, item A is approval of work group meetings for June 16, 2022. You and I had discussed a couple of typographical edits, and you agreed to make those on that document. Item B, which Dr. Moore has asked be removed from the consent agenda, is approval of the work group meeting minutes for 12/14/2022. C is a commitment to agreement on producing work group agendas and supporting materials a minimum of 7 days prior to the scheduled meetings. I don't know if anybody wants to have any further discussion on that one. And then item D is approval of work group annual monthly meeting schedule from February 2023 to January 2024. That is a document that we exchanged, that your office had prepared, Jody, that we exchanged. We had a couple of changes on that. For the record, I would like to note what I believe is an agreement that due to the respective trial calendars of the different law firms and lawyers that are working on this case, there's the possibility that one or more of those meetings will have to be rescheduled. But as we know, trials that are scheduled and are certain to go oftentimes do not. So in the event those those trials are rescheduled, we didn't want to move the dates too much. And then Doc Jones.
I just could not attend the June meeting unless that's rescheduled. That's the only one where I couldn't be, so I just wanted to let the group know.
I would object to pulling the minutes from the last meeting.
Well, it's a consent agenda, so, you
I
know,
know.
there's going to be items on it, and if there's not agreement that all the items on the consent agenda should be on the consent agenda, then any member of the group can pull one or more items from the consent agenda.
I just noticed that when you have those consent agendas, stuff fly through like a rocket, and there's no opportunity for open discussion and debate on it. Is carte blanche sometimes.
Well, I'm looking at the most recent agenda that's been passed around, and it specifically anticipates items being pulled from the consent agenda as item number 3. So, Jody, I don't know if you have different thoughts.
Is this consent agenda emailed to us?
Oh, I don't know. I wouldn't have done that.
Yes, this is the agenda that was circulated with the edits from Matt when he circulated it a week ago. I believe it was on the 12th of January.
Okay.
And the revisions that were requested by the district were included in red line. There was no movement from the consent agenda at that time of the work group minutes from December 14th to the items pulled. The district is requesting to do that now at the meeting. So I thought that the purpose of circulating the agendas in advance of the meeting was to have agreement on what would be on the agenda.
And that may be confusion that we can avoid moving forward, but I can tell you every board, every organization I've ever worked with or for, this is how it operates. Any member of the group can pull an item from the consent agenda to have it be considered separately. Is that how the school district, school board
If
operates?
we're following Robert's Rules of Orders, this is straightforward and to the point. If we're going to choose not to follow Robert's Rules of Order, then we can continue this conversation.
Okay. We would just ask that if the purpose of circulating the agendas in advance is to have some agreement on what we're going to discuss at the meetings, that to the extent we're going to move things off of the consent agenda, that we notify each other in advance of the meeting so that we're prepared for that.
I want to be clear, you're not surprised that we have an issue with the December 2022 minutes,
Yes.
are you?
I am surprised. As of last night, I was surprised, yes.
Okay, but you're not surprised that at this moment, we're asking for that to be removed from the consent agenda?
No. Go ahead, Michelle.
Not really, because we've been dealing with last minute shenanigans from you all for a while, so I'm not surprised. Jody's new, so maybe.
Well, let me ask you this, Jody, would you consider what we've just asked to do, which is remove an item from a consent agenda, to be a last-minute shenanigans?
Given that we agreed to circulate documents in advance of the meeting, in order to avoid last-minute changes, yes, I was very surprised by the request to take it off the agenda a week after what we understood was to be agreement that it was on the agenda.
All right, again, I'm not being clear. Are you surprised that today, right now, at 5:30, we have asked, or a member of the work group has asked to remove the December 2022 work group meeting minutes from the consent agenda?
Yes, I am surprised.
You thought
After I
that-
received your email today regarding the confusion and stating that, basically acknowledging that you didn't read it thoroughly, I thought we were moving forward with it today, and that the discussion by the work group would be about what discrepancies there may have been in the minutes. I didn't anticipate that would be happening off the record.
Okay.
So yes, I am surprised.
I think we're talking past each other. My understanding is the consent agenda item was approval of the December minutes.
Right.
And now you're saying that you understood that we were going to have a discussion later about discrepancies in the December minutes?
Yes, that was my understanding, that was, to the extent that you disagreed with that one substantive point on the meeting minutes, that it would be, that the work group would have an opportunity to discuss it.
Well, then this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the way organizations run. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't approve the minutes and then go back and figure out if there needs to be corrections to the minutes. The point is to make sure that the minutes are accurate and correct before they're approved.
Well, that was on the agenda, approval of the minutes.
Jody's not suggesting that we would approve the minutes and then go back and review them. But while we're looking at approval of the work group minutes, that would be the opportunity to discuss the edits that you've raised.
That's not what a consent agenda is.
So my issue is that didn't these minutes be emailed to the district and they then were allowed to make their own edits, which is why I'm not understanding why there is still discrepancy if it has gone in between the attorneys to both sides and edits were supposed to have been made.
You want to address that?
No, you can address it. I think she's asking you. why the edits aren't recorded in the minutes that you circulated back.
Well, there were a number of issues that we raised, and you said, no, we disagree, and that was the end of it.
I don't think that's accurate. You never redlined the minutes and sent us back a revised draft of the minutes.
No, I raised issues with the minutes.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. So if we're pulling it from the consent agenda for today, when will the work group discuss the minutes for December?
Can I step in? I think we're just thinking it from a board meeting. So if it's under consent for a board meeting, it's been workshopped and talked about. So by the time it goes under consent, it's a rubber stamp of approval. Moving it to discussion means we talk about it.
Okay.
And then it could subsequently, someone can make a motion after discussion and clarity and revision to approve. That makes sense?
And
Yes.
maybe I'm just, maybe I missed things. Did we agree to follow Robert's Rules of Order at any point in time? Okay, so I guess because we're also not following Robert's Rules of Order right now.
We're sure not, but.
So that was my.
But I'm not
Right.
familiar with, and I've worked with and for organizations that don't follow Robert's Rules of Orders. My understanding of consent agenda is these are items that everyone agrees to. We lump them together. I don't like the phrase rubber stamp, but I know what you're saying.
Sorry.
They've already been considered, they've already been vetted, they've already been evaluated, and we don't have to have formal drawn-out discussion in order to approve them. We lump them together, and it's an efficient way to move it. If there is disagreement regarding the accuracy of the December 2022 work group minutes, which I think you would acknowledge there is,
Yes, there is.
okay, then what we're suggesting is, let's not approve them, and
So
certainly
you'd
not
like
as
to
part
move
of.
them to the discussion section?
Correct.
Okay.
That's what Dr. Moore asked to do, was to pull
Can we
the
talk about
December minutes
can we talk about the minutes from the last meeting? Maybe that's just
and
easier.
pull it
Yes,
out
that's what
from
we
the
would like to
consent
do
agenda.
as well. That's what we would like to do as well.
Okay. And what I don't want to do is skip over what I understand might be a hard conflict with Doc Jones on the calendar for D. So I'm not going to move anything, but if,
Or do you guys want to schedule that?
Well, we can move to discussion. I don't want to hold anything up. That's just the 1 week we take a family vacation, so I wouldn't be able to be here or on Teams, so that's all.
I don't object to discussing the date that you need to move at this time.
okay. So that leaves on the consent agenda, approval of the work group meetings for the June 16, 2022 meeting, which is the last draft, Jody, that you and I exchanged, and a commitment to agreement on producing agendas and supporting materials a minimum of 7 days prior to scheduled meetings as the two remaining items on the consent agenda.
Works for me.
All right, does anyone want to, I guess, make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So I would move that we approve all items on the consent agenda, given the fact that, was it B, that was going to be discussed?
B and D.
B and D.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor? Let the record show we had a unanimous vote. And you want to take them in order? So the first item that was pulled was the minutes from our last meeting. And Matt, you want to kick us off?
Could I intercede for a moment? You know, my spirit is just restless. And so that we can move forward, I'm conflicted that we sit here back and forth, and I feel that we're, as the NAACP, we're begging for something that should have been done long ago, that's owed to us, that has been designated by a judge to do, and we're playing games all these years later and begging for crumbs off the table when we are sitting here fighting over minutes, when our children are falling by the wayside, and we're, as an organization, that we are begging for something that's do for education for a public domain, that we should be automatically given those rights and privileges that we're sitting here in this room bickering over. And as an organization, I'm in the mindset that we are begging for our constitutional rights. So it's problematic, and I thought we were going to come this time, moving forward, stop the shenanigans, as Mashawn said, be real. We have a law firm that understands us, that's willing to walk with us. All we want to do, egos, agendas, and all the foolishness out the window. We're not getting paid. We want what our children deserve. Dr. Warrior said, children that, when we started this, were in kindergarten are now in high school. And the statistics about our children are still horrendous. And we're bickering over stuff like, you don't agree with the minutes, or something that we could have taken care of and not wasted all of this time. So I'm in a bad place, and I'm conflicted as to why we're going through all of this foolishness when the lives of our children. And Dr. Moore, to go on something you say all the time, for the children, how you
Best by kids,
best by kids.
Thank you, sir.
And as we sit here today, are we doing what's best by kids? That's a question, and we have to look in the mirror. Are we doing best by kids when we letting this thing just permeate and rotate and foolish around, when we come to the table trying to say, okay, here we are. But we get caught up in, I don't like that word you use, I don't like that word you use, and our children are losing. My 2 cents. We can go on.
And I want to add to what Mr. Brown said. When I was looking at my notes from the December meeting, I wrote down a few things, and I thought about a few things. I know that we started with Section 2, and we were looking at the key performance indicators, and I look at the note. It says most of the time we agreed on everything, and that was good. That was really good for me. I thought, okay, here we go. And when I look at all the other areas that are in the joint plan, for example, extracurricular, transportation, recruit and retain, mentoring, and so forth, I thought, okay, here we go, we can do this. I'm 100% believe that everyone at this table wants the same thing for our students. I 100% believe that. And not only do I believe it, that whenever the day comes that we can achieve unitary status, not just put it on a shelf, but achieve unitary status, and then keep it in our achievement gap policy and work with NAACP on sustainability policy. I thought, okay. And I think it's very important, and I was a little disappointed when I saw that we won't be talking about, I was ready to go to Section 3 and think, what can happen here? Okay, when you look at the notes from Section 2, we did really well. You know, we're on that, I think, number 8 that we have to talk about as far as retaining our African-American teachers, but I agree. I mean, we have to look at our goals, and with that goal, obviously you have your objectives and strategies, and I said this twice in the meeting in December, and what's the quantifiable measure at the end? What do we need to do? And guess what? It's not the end of it, it's the beginning. Okay, this is where we are. That's not gonna be good enough in 3 years, or that's not, you know, that's why the sustainability and the achievement gap come in. So, I do Robert's Rules as the new chair, and, you know, I agree, I forgot who said it with consent. Sometimes there's so many things on consent, it's like we try to push it through. Well, we've been through all of that. We have understood it, but sometimes our community does not, so we have to be a little bit more specific on that. So I know we can do this, and I think we're not going to talk about key performance indicators this time, but I just know we can move forward because we have the same end goal for our students, and just want to echo that what Mr. Brown said. I know we can do it.
So you want to go through the minutes? Oh.
Yeah, I guess so. So we have December minutes that were prepared by someone from the NAACP side, and to provide some context to what Jody said, I did not give them the attention that I should have when they came in. And that's my fault, and like I told Jody, it won't happen again. But as we started looking more closely at what were in the draft minutes, we realized that they did not comport with what we remembered from the meeting. And when we went back to the video and tried to figure out, is it something we missed? Is our recollection flawed? We realized that it wasn't. And so at that point, the trustworthiness of the whole document becomes an issue. And so, again, these meetings are short enough that in the future, we'll be able to confirm by rewatching the video whether or not the minutes are accurate. I have said I will do a better job of taking notes of what happens. Dr. Shafty is committed to do the same. But as it stands right now, it's my position, I don't think it's a good use of this group's time right now to go through the minutes and determine where they're accurate, where they might be inaccurate. If there's parts of the minutes that anyone in this group thinks is important that they are memorialized, for example, the indicators that the group agreed to last week, I don't think anybody on our side would have a problem pulling those out and making those a separate item to be voted upon. But as far as the remainder of the minutes, and again, I've already apologized to my client for my lack of diligence. I can't recommend that they're approved because I can't guarantee their accuracy.
Oh, can you point out what's not accurate? Can you say what areas? Because we all can go back to the video as well. We'd like to do that because we want to make sure that it is accurate and the integrity is maintained.
Like I said, I'm not prepared to do that at this time.
But if you're going to impugn the integrity of our attorneys, and now you're not going to definitively tell us what you're talking about, but you say we can memorialize those 7, I mean, I'm slow, but today ain't one of them. Something not well about that. You're going to impugn their integrity in this open meeting about those minutes, but you're not going to afford us the opportunity to know what is wrong, to define for ourselves the integrity of those minutes?
But this is the filibustering, Tony, like this
I
is
know,
where it
I just
starts,
want it
right?
on the table because
Right.
this is what my confliction is, that we are playing games and our children are being lost in the process. If you're gonna come in here and disrespect these ladies, then put it on the table and let all of us see it.
And at least be specific. Otherwise, you're acting in bad faith. Like, we've come here in good faith. Our attorneys go back and forth with you to ensure that this is a productive meeting, that we get as much done as possible. In the last minute, you say, "Oh, we can't support the integrity of these meetings with minutes," when the minutes are bare bones. Trust me, if I wrote the minutes, I would have put in a whole lot more to memorialize, because I know the bait and switch that happens with the district. But our attorney said, no, let's just make sure that we get accuracy and we're straight to the point about what's important. We don't want to convolute and have too much information. Let's just stick to the indicators and what's important. Then you come and you say that you question the integrity, but I can't tell you what parts. Okay.
Status quo.
So, setting aside what you've said about the statements not being accurate, we'll wait for your detail and specific notes about where we got it wrong. We'd ask that you please mark the minute of the video that you're referring to as a courtesy to us. With respect to what you said about pulling out the agreement on the indicators from the minutes and agreeing to that separately, it's our position that should be included. If it needs to be done separately as well, it's fine, but the minutes capture what was discussed and agreed upon by the work group. And we think that it should be reflected in the minutes what the work group agreed upon. So I don't see any harm or anything improper about including where the agreement was as it relates to each one of the proposed indicators. Do you disagree with that?
the 7 indicators within the minutes, I think we're all in agreement that, because we worked through them at the last meeting.
Right.
So in my mind, if we get nothing else done today, let's approve those. I mean, there we have something that is done in terms of those 7 areas. We're going to discuss the 8th down the agenda. And I think our attorney's concern is to ensure that the minutes 100% accurately reflect the conversation and dialogue that took place at the last meeting. So it's not a matter of filibuster or not acting in good faith. It's just the opportunity to ensure that it reflects 100% what is accurate. So,
And that's what we want as well. I think it was the characterization that we did something underhanded. That was not appreciated by the group.
I don't think that to be
Yeah.
true. I don't think, and I don't know who took them.
It was a group effort. It was a group
Okay,
effort.
okay.
We took on
Okay,
that
team.
responsibility, so
Many- yeah.
I think that it's just, offense was taken on this side by that because we're doing everything that we can to
Understood.
show up, right? And it's a burden that we agreed to take on. And so telling us that we were underhanded or tried to sneak something in is what this group takes offense to.
Understood, and I think as we go through and do the due diligence, that, as Matt said, we probably should have done prior to this meeting, there'll be the opportunity to say, okay, I don't think as you go through these issues, okay, that sounds appropriate, okay, that's fine as well, because just as you want to get it 100% correct, as do we. Because
Okay.
at the end of the day, if we approve something and it isn't reflective of what was discussed or the intent, then that becomes the filibuster. That becomes you said A and did B. And to be very, very open, honest, and transparent, as Tony shares, yeah, 100% accurate. We have to ensure that those missteps don't take place. And this is a desire for us to really take the time to ensure that, we're not in a court or across the table saying, no, you approve this in the minutes because you didn't look closely enough, and that's not actually the intent or doesn't accurately capture what was said. And the minutes are, once approved, that's what we have. So I think taking the time to do it is a necessary step in order to ensure that everybody is on the up and up on this side.
I would just add, going back and mark that spot where Matt said what he said. I, as the president of the Indian River County branch of the NAACP, take offense at the inference thrown at our attorneys. I deeply take offense to it. And we can reflect in the minutes his wordage, the verbiage that he used. And it's, to me, offensive. With that being said, we can move forward.
Well, I
I
will,
suggest that we split the cost of getting our meetings transcribed. So going forward, it is just a transcription and we can agree upon the company. And that way we do not have this anymore. And we also have a much more substantive documentation of what's discussed in these meetings. And it will not have to be approved by either side because it is directly from the meeting.
What was when you were going to pull it from consent, what was your end goal? To discuss it right now when you pulled it, or to table it to the next time?
table it to the next time. With the hope, sir, being that we could do exactly what we've been asked to do, which is look at the video, confirm if there were areas that are not accurately reflected. And I do want to take this opportunity to apologize. I did not mean to impugn or assign any sort of underhanded purpose to it, to the work that you guys did. I didn't know you had done it. I just know that there were a handful of things in there that I didn't remember, and when we started to look, we couldn't find confirmation. And that just creates this issue of, let's take a step back and table it, right? I mean, we're looking at June minutes, right? If there's anything that's important from that meeting, that's important that the work group feels is important to somehow memorialize today, let's figure out a way to do that. But as far as the minutes generally, I just wanted to take a step back and give them the review that they are entitled to.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're talking about December minutes, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, I appreciate that. And I would agree with Mershawn. I think that might be a good solution,
100%.
to have a court reporter to transcribe the meetings. I think it would take the burden off both sides in doing this, and so we would agree to that.
I don't know if you have to take a motion in a second,
Yeah.
since we're not following Robert's Rules of Order, but I 100% agree, and it does put us in a situation. We have a company that we work here locally with, very, very, very reasonable.
That's wonderful, thank you.
I just want to add is, on the board, when you look at minutes afterwards, I think to myself, did I say that? And I look back and said, yeah, I said it. So again, with this, there was never an intent saying, oh, what you said or what you meant wasn't right. It's just that, we just want to make sure it's right. It wasn't anything.
And let's be clear, sometimes people can say one thing at the beginning of the meeting and something completely different at the
I
end,
said, I said, yeah, I sure did.
right? So,
No intent to, we just want to make sure it's right, but Mershawn's idea about transcription saves us all, I think.
a lot of heartache. Yeah.
And is there I don't know if it's too early, but would you want to entertain a motion to approve those 7 items as discussed and scribed at our last meeting?
I would ask that, I mean, because I think that memorializing our agreements is a topic of discussion in general, and that we figure out a protocol for doing so. If it's making a motion, then I think that that's a good suggestion, but just so we know, moving forward, if it's going to be like, is it a motion, is it this, is it that, just so we're clear on how we're actually approving things.
Hey,
We're so much more in line, and I think when we see your email responses and Matt's email responses, they look like they're on different pages, but like you guys are saying the same thing. So when we edited the agenda, and that's on us, we asked to move that as the first item because of those, like, we just didn't know a process.
Got it.
We had different protocols in place. We're learning. We don't know if it's the way that we're used to operating or if this is a new function. So I think it's so ironic to hear that recommendation, because I just think things are getting lost in your emails.
Yeah, that was one of the things I said was if the group wants to have a protocol on how to approve things, that should be done first before the group starts approving things. And it sounds like that's what you're suggesting now. Yeah.
So-
Have a set of protocols? I'm sorry, so, I mean, is that what we're looking for, or?
Yes.
Our board just established some, but.
we don't
That took
have
a
that
little
much
while
time to
there,
be doing all
but-
that now.
No, but, okay.
But if you want to move to the floor, what item is that? The discussion on process or protocol on how decisions are made, I think that would be valuable.
I see that as item 4A on the agenda.
Did you,
So if we're at 4A,
We're at
go ahead.
4A.
So just to start the conversation, do we want to follow Robert Rules of Order? Do we want to co-author on a agenda? Where do we start, Matt?
Well, I mean, Roberts
Need a
can
chair.
oftentimes, I'm sorry, ma'am?
you need a chair.
Yeah, and oftentimes it creates, it's real easy, I think, for groups to say, we'll just default to Robert's rules. And there's oftentimes unintended consequences to that. I think there's a benefit to having at least some agreement as to what constitutes a quorum and, how votes are made and how decisions are ultimately arrived upon. It was great that the approval of the consent agenda as amended was unanimous, because I think that would qualify under any set of protocols, but what happens when they're not unanimous? So I think, I know I sent you a very brief kind of starting point as to what is a quorum that must be present or at least participating in order for the work group to have any ability to come to a decision, and then how do you get those decisions ultimately ratified formally so that moving forward, we know what the group did. I don't know if you've got any other thoughts on, for those or additional protocols to consider.
Can you remind us what your proposal was? I don't have the
Well,
email with
and
me.
it's, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, it's kind of the standard quorum is, 50% plus one. So in this case, it would be 5. That is up for, it can be changed. And then a simple majority vote. I like certain parts of Robert's rules where, you talk about bringing a point to a call.
Call the question.
Yeah, call the question. Doc Jones, and to a certain extent, Dr. Moore are probably as well-versed in those as anyone, but again, it requires a chair to do those types of things, and then it's a simple motion practice, My thought is having that done first gives a certain amount of, it means every decision that's made after that has that formality, that stamp of having been formally approved. But it doesn't sound like you guys have kind of.
Mershawn, Kevin, I'll ask you guys to weigh in. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it makes me think a little bit more when he says, quorum 50% plus 1, which would be 5. So if there are, all 4 of us are here and you have 1, would we consider that a proper quorum? Okay. So we'd have to think
Maybe-
around that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I don't want to cut you off. I have something on my heart now. So
Okay. And then I guess we have to discuss the Roberts rules. Michonne, what do you think that might be, or Tony might be? Would that be too stringent to move, or?
Forgive me, I have
I mean,
not.
the fact
Go
that
ahead.
we don't have a chair, I don't think Robert's rules is probably the best because we don't have a chair and all that, but we can discuss the quorum for
so
the meeting. And I
sorry.
would also say that there should be at least a minimum 3 on each side to have a quorum for these meetings, just so it can be a productive meeting and a majority of the team is there.
I like that, minimum 3 on
Majority.
each side if we're going to do that.
Or equal numbers, minimum of 3, and not take a vote. So as a
Yeah.
work group, as we're working through things, and as I envision the depth of this work, it may be work groups doing individual work. But I don't think we should take a vote unless there's a minimum of 3 on each side. Otherwise, that would be tabled to the next meeting. And I don't want to throw a wrench in it, and as I ask about Robert Rules of Order, and then I reflect on the last meeting where we just kind of went through the agenda, we worked, we had the open dialogue and the conversation. Some of it was really, really informal. That was the spirit I think we all want to create, and we all have lived this, some much longer than others, but our recent past tells us maybe some of that formality and the voting, we shifted or collectively agreed to go to a work group to do the work, versus something very stuffy and formal. So maybe Robert Rules isn't the best way, but we do norm. Maybe we don't leave here tonight until we know what the agenda is for the next thing, for the next time. So we all, I mean, you said it, you guys are volunteering your time. You have lives and jobs and other things that you do. If we agree upon, there's no reason not to be ready for the upcoming meeting. So not to make it seem less formal, but yes, I think we all need to, don't have a vote unless there's at least 3 on each side. Or if there's 3 on one side and 4 on the other, then we don't vote. It has to have equal numbers, however you would voice that, otherwise it's just not fair.
And on teams, you can vote, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And then ultimately define the agenda for the next meeting coming up. Because I think, as Doc was sharing, she was thinking we were going to do KPIs and we're not doing KPIs. So, I think we all should leave saying, hey, here's what we're doing next time. So we're all clear, we're all prepared.
circulate documents. I think this was already agreed to, but circulate
Yes,
documents
so-
a week before.
And another one is, what one of our attorneys alluded to, is how do we memorialize, solidify whatever decisions we made?
What do you mean by that, Mr. B?
You would say, under Robert's rule, we would do a vote. For instance, the KPI, the seven that we all agreed upon. Do we just arbitrarily say we agreed upon them? What's the process moving forward? In those cases, how would we, just a verbal agreement? It goes back to when me and Dr. Warrior was with the judge. She said, the NAACP school district sit down, make an agreement, come to an agreement, decide on it, and come on back to them and sign off. So simplifying it, but then working in good faith and not all this foolishness. We can go there, Dr. Moore, but then we get snatched into these dark holes. And I'm tired of dark holes. If I'm going to stand on good faith and go out here and let's do this, we need a way to say that whatever we decide on stays. And it doesn't come back, well, we saw this and that wordage and that verbiage wasn't good because the American language is so hard because of the multiplicity and duplicity of word usage and word meaning. So we can get tied up in this foolishness, but we need to find a way to say, this is what we're going to agree on, move on.
Yeah, I understand. I was a little, I was sure we agreed on the 7 the last time, and then Matt was saying vote on them, and I'm thinking, okay, so we agreed, now we have to vote. So whatever it's going to be, it's going to be, but I wouldn't, yeah.
I apologize, I did not mean to interrupt you. My point in bringing it up was, we all agreed, and then Jody and I started talking about, how do we formalize
Okay.
agreements? So
Yeah.
I think every member of the work group believed that 1 through 7 had been agreed to.
Right.
But then the lawyers starting talking and said,
Screwed everything up.
We always get in the way.
how do we formalize it, and do we need to formalize it? Okay?
Right.
And then the issue with the December minutes came up, and my fear was that somebody might think that our not wanting to have the December minutes be part of the consent agenda was somehow trying to undo the agreement on 1 to 7. So I thought I was trying to help move that along and say, if we're going to have a protocol for agreeing on things, then let's make 1 through 7 for section 2 the first one, and then that way, to Mr. Brown's point, it's done, there's no going back on it.
So how do you guys feel about, I think it breaks it up if we have to, we had 7 indicators, if we had to vote after each one, that doesn't seem very conversational to me. So could we have that organic conversation before concluding that section? Have a concluding statement. So do we agree to indicators, how many ever they are, 1 through 6, yes or no, and then having action steps? So having a 2-part kind of summative protocol before we leave the section. Is there agreement? Are there action steps? So replicating the last meeting, we would have had agreement on 7. The action step would have been for the district to propose a new indicator 8. And that way we're all on the same page, we're speaking the same language, there's a chance to clarify. I said this, no, I didn't mean this. So just a thought, because if we break it up indicator by indicator, that's not going to feel like it did last time. To
I
call
think
for a formal
last time
vote.
we did break it up indicator by indicator. I mean, I am just like thinking, I love the idea of, keeping it conversational, but also knowing how we move on to the next indicator. When do we know it's time that we've reached an agreement?
It was conversational, but there was, okay, everybody agrees on indicator 1?
Yeah.
We agree? And we move on to indicator 2, and so you're saying at the very end, there'll be a summary where you're like,
For that vote, or however,
Voting on
whatever
1,
we
2, 3,
formalize
4.
that
Oh, I see what you're
process
saying.
as.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we felt that it was natural last time. Like, we knew we talked through 1 to 7. We got to 8. We had more discussion, and we knew that's the one, like, we couldn't come to agreement on. But to have that would have been a final statement. Can we all make a motion that we agree to 1 to 7, and indicator 8 will have follow-up by the school district, and then we vote? I don't know, just a thought.
I like it.
Works. Go ahead.
and then after that, and just going back to Tony's point, does that then need to be written as a separate agreement in writing? Or is the voting on it sufficient and it'll be recorded and memorialized in the meeting minutes?
Yeah, the vote's the action, I
Yep.
think, right?
As long as it's
100%.
I liked the idea of working off of a written document, and I'm seeing nods. You know, voting and saying, all right, somebody would move to accept indicators 1 through 7 as discussed last week is, I think, a little bit imprecise, whereas indicators 1 through 7 as written on the document that you guys provided, then we're able to attach this or include this with the minutes, and we've got kind of the written word to go along with it, instead of going along with what a transcript might say.
And that, what you're proposing, that would go into the consent along with the minutes as like?
We go along with the minutes,
It would
whether
go
they're in
along
a
with the
consent
minutes.
or as an action item.
Right, okay. What do you think?
Mr.
It's-
Brown, do you think that's memorializing?
That's, to me, that's becoming cumbersome. It's too legalese for me. It's too, going back to Ms. Shafter and Dr. Moore, if we're going to do this, we need to do it based on the 4 work group members doing it and the attorneys letting us know what we can or can't do, and giving us the legal foundation for what we can or can't do. Not to, and that's why I love this group that we've been blessed with. Don't orchestrate for us. Support us and let us know if we're about to step off a cliff. Or is this feasible in a legal sense? And not what we can't do. Judge Williams is the only one that can tell us what we can't do. We can summarize it by case law and this and that, but until Judge Williams sees it, she's the only one can say, this ain't gonna work, or I don't agree, or I don't think that's relevant. So if I don't want it to be so cumbersome, but I want us to be held accountable, but how do we get there? We can't vote. You want a document. I was listening to Dr. Shafter when we say a voice vote, which says, I agree, I agree, I agree, and if it's memorialized in the minutes, because in the NAACP, we live by the minutes. What's in the minutes is gold.
By the minutes.
You know what I'm saying? I can take the minutes to the bank, and I can open a bank account or whatever, so I don't like, Matt, all of that tied in. It becomes too much legal stuff, rather than a group of people saying, we're going to step out here and do what's right for these children and get out of this mess we're in.
I agree. And then what you said, we'll need the lawyers to make sure we do it right as far as when we give it to the judge, you know what I mean? I like the dialogue, I like the engagement.
I would just say, and
Keep us doing it right.
yeah, I don't have any objection to creating a separate document at the end of the minutes. I think having a separate vote on it the month after may slow things down. I don't know if that's what you're proposing, but what I'm envisioning is exactly what Dr. Shafty was suggesting, much like it happened last month where we have a very organic conversation, the agreements are made. Then you suggested that, sorry, Dr. Moore, as echoed by Dr. Shafty. And then remember, we're going to have a court reporter.
Yeah.
We're going to have a court reporter, so we have a transcript of that. We'll record it in the meeting minutes.
Okay.
And that's now 3 times, that's 4, right? The conversation, the vote, the transcript, and the minutes. We got it in 4 places. I think we're covered.
And the additional layer, we'll have our material 7 days in advance.
And on YouTube,
So we'll
and
have
everybody else
it-
watching.
we'll
We're
be
good.
able
We're
to
good.
mark it up, yes.
I guess.
We're good.
Yeah, that's fine.
No, and I think to build the trust and ensure you all can say, shenanigans are a thing of the past, or whatever. I think it has to be the way in which Tony just said it. It has to be. Otherwise, it becomes the structure of it becomes,
Adversarial.
yeah,
I don't like
Process.
100%. And I would just, as we go through, and I would say this to both teams, when we have to name that, or, you know, and I think Tony did a good job at the beginning of the meeting saying, I just want to share how I feel. I think we all need to do that and not to let it fester, like, well, wait a minute, if you're saying this, because that, it's almost like a norm that we would have. We have to
Right.
speak that into existence when we feel it, and it may be uncomfortable, but we have to have those conversations, and have enough trust in each other to say, no, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. What I was saying was this, or this is a big sticking point for NAACP. This is a big sticking point for us, and it's not a diversion or a way to get around it. It's just, this is a barrier that we have. This is, you know, let's attack the problem as a problem and not as a way to, you know, just push this through to get it done. Because I can guarantee you the people on this side, that's not the desire. The desire is the work.
Let me read something from the minutes that Mr. Brown said last week. Mr. Brown stated
Do we dispute what you're about to read?
Don't you use those
Tell us
minutes.
after.
They're fraudulent. Don't use those minutes.
Everybody taking shots, dog. They said, don't you use those minutes.
No, but it kind of summarizes it.
Oh, boy.
Mr.
That
Brown
was good.
stated the work group's decision and agreements are memorialized in the status reports to the court, with both parties signing off on it, and that sustainability will require the district also to take accountability. That's what we're talking about, you know, so you said it before we even talked about it. That's cool. All right, we're good. What's
Next.
Moving on.
next?
I think, are we supposed to go back to the calendar for the
Oh, yeah,
June
that
date?
one calendar. I'm sorry. I'm gone from June 18th, and like, I hate to miss a meeting, but if you guys can't change it to I'm just gone the week of the 19th.
Of what month? I'm sorry.
June, and we're scheduled for June 21, so I hate missing it, but I'm back to 25th, you know, so. Or the week before, if that works for people, but everybody's calendar, I know, is rough. I might be able to call in on Teams, but I'm not
If
sure.
you're on no, please be with your family.
Okay, I'll take the week.
No Wi-Fi in Hawaii.
When is,
Oh, yeah, right, it's North Carolina.
I don't have a printed copy. When is the May meeting and when is the July meeting, if you know, Jody?
Got extras.
Appreciate it.
May is 17th.
No, we changed,
Oh, we did, I'm
we
sorry.
proposed a different May date.
One of the other things we discussed, and I'm just throwing it out there, I'm not suggesting it, is the work group document anticipates monthly meetings. But I don't know that there would be anything that would prohibit the parties from agreeing to waive that if necessary or desirable. The other thing that we talked about internally was, and I know I proposed this to you, Jody, was having maybe an all-day meeting. And I understand work schedules might preclude meaningful participation. We've thought about offering or suggesting a Saturday if there's a benefit, and that's not something that needs to be decided now, I'm just sharing it. And, well, you know what, if it's helpful in working on this calendar, you know, picking a Saturday that we could do, you know, an 8-hour day to maybe get, or 6 or whatever, to get, knock out more work. Okay?
Do we have the May date? So we need to find a new June date.
With regard to June, would the work group be amenable to moving it to the Thursday or Friday before the week of the 19th? I mean, I don't remember when never mind, it's due July 31st, the joint status report.
Are you looking at June 15th or 16th, honey, that Thursday or Friday?
That's what I'm suggesting. I don't know. Mershawn, Kevin, Tony, Leah.
It's fine with me.
June 16 is workable for me.
June 16 is a Friday?
15th, which one?
15
or
is
16,
better.
Thursday, 15 is better.
Yeah. This I know some.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do anything before the 19th.
So we go after that then, or?
What about the week after, Mershawn, the 26th? the week of the 26th.
Yes, that's fine.
29th?
29th.
Thank you.
All right.
So that gives us a month before, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
thank you.
The other thing I wanted to call out is that these meetings are highlighted as between the hours of 6 and 8. Matt, I know you're traveling from.
Wait, guys, the 29th is the weekend before the 4th. So you all are okay with that? No one's gonna be on vacation?
As long as you don't do it on Friday, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Is there a benefit to doing it on maybe Tuesday, the 27th? So we're not
Yeah,
bumping
that's
up
better.
against that long weekend?
Yeah, it might be a good idea. I'm good with that.
Is Mrs. Wall okay with it? Oh, we haven't,
Oh.
I haven't heard her in a while.
She doesn't want to hear her own echo.
The last weekend of July.
Claudia, let us know if you have any objections.
No, I agree. Thank you.
27th,
27th?
that's what we're doing?
So what are our times then? Are they, is 6 better for you or 5?
Yeah, I think because, for us, it doesn't matter, but I think Mershawn and Kevin, so that they have time to get here after work.
You're okay at 5, Mr. Browning?
5.
Or 6, 5 or 6, which one you prefer, you and Michelle?
Or 5:30.
5:30 might be good.
5:30 is
That
a
kind of
happy-
meets in the middle.
6 gives me opportunity to commute from Orlando if I'm coming.
6 it is.
We'll make it work, Michelle. 6 it
Thank you
is.
so much.
She know I'm not responsible.
So with those dates, we approve our calendar until
Voicemail,
January 24th.
I agree.
I agree.
Never going to be able to tell the judge.
I memorialize.
And I like this, the calendar, one thing that I was thinking as it was being discussed, if we get all the minutia out the way, we can move through some of these dates and get some work done. And even as much as we've taken excess time, but clearing the table so that we don't have a repetition of all this wasted energy and wasted time, because our children are being the victims of our ineptness. So,
Ready. What's next?
Back to the agenda.
So now we're
we're on number 8.
4B.
Or B.
Wait. Yep, right?
Annual compliance report. What do you got, Jody?
So, let's talk about the annual compliance report. I think it's important to set out a little bit of the background, right? What the work group was tasked with doing, what the work group took on to do, in a little section of the report. And then, let's see, so I took some notes. Purpose, objective, and responsibilities of the work group as set forth in the ECF number 227-1. So that's just based on that document. Overview regarding the 2022 meetings, when they occurred, when they didn't occur.
Are you talking about this work group or the other work group that we, so will we talk?
Well, I think we would have to explain that transition
Okay.
to the court, right?
Will they need minutes from that work group or?
If it's a joint report, so we're
Yeah.
co-authors of it, so.
But she needs to know we were at least meeting.
Yes.
You know, okay, all right.
Yes. So it would be a description of who was at the meetings, who was present when they occurred,
Okay.
the topics, I guess, of conversation from those meeting minutes. Just a summary. I'm not talking about getting into the, nitty-gritty of them. An explanation that there was a break in the meetings for a significant amount of time to the court. Let's see. And then I think we can describe what happened when the work group convened again in December and the agreements that were made as it relates to the indicators of Section 2. And then we can go through each one of the sections and just let the court know. For Section 2, we have agreement on the indicators. For Section 3, what our plans are going forward, right? So what is our intent? To identify the barriers to achievement, to find and agree on a goal statement, performance indicators, measures, as we spoke about with Dr. Shafty, expected outcomes, and agree on data elements. I think that's the objective for each of the sections and should be the focus. Hopefully we can do at least one whole section with all of those things at a group meeting or more than one, especially if we're circulating them in advance. There might be less to discuss. We propose that, as it relates to Section 6, that the work group provide the court with some of the background data that was reviewed by the work group during the initial meetings, so that she understands the focus of those meetings and what was discussed, and what the data shows. And that's it.
So when, that is due when?
31st.
So will you share that with Matt so we can take a look at it in writing?
Yes, we haven't, unfortunately, we have not done it yet, but
Okay.
we are in the process and we'll get that done.
So just maybe it's a group conversation. So this is the annual report, going back over the totality of the year. And I'm just going to try to tell you what I heard. The prior makeup, we had these meetings, we agreed to do these things. There was a break in the work, newly configured group. This group has shown the progress that we all can state. I want the judge to see progress.
Yeah.
Whatever that progress is. So as we create this narration, it is, to me, the story is, there was progress under Group 1. The theory of action changed. This new theory of action, and I got nothing to say as to why it changed. I don't think that's for us to say. This new group taking a different direction, and progress is taken. I don't want her to read it and say, have the picture in her head, here, what is going on in Indian River County again. It's just, there was one way of work, and there was progress, and how you would script that, and this is the evidence of that progress. Reconvened, and obviously she knows that because you had like a private conversation with her. And this is where we're at now. It's just telling the story so she sees it and says, okay, there was a shift in the theory of action, but they are moving forward. We just have to be careful because this is a big possibility to go astray in the telling of this story.
What was the theory of action prior?
The theory of action prior was it was agreed upon really to look at specific areas. So we really began to explore or dig into data and allow that data to take us wherever we were looking for a root cause. So as we were disaggregating data, sharing it, discussing it, it was just true problem solving, trying to drill down to not necessarily trying to force a problem into one of the different sections of the joint plan, but where's the root cause? So we were approaching early childhood readiness. That kind of where we were kind of bringing ourselves to. That's just kind of as far as we got. So it was a theory of action in which we were not saying joint plan, this. It was like, all right, let's just get to work and do work by problem solving around the data and do a true data exploration that leads us to a jointly agreed upon problem to solve.
How did you decide what data to review? Or did the district bring
We
it
have
to
the
us?
minutes from all the meetings, too, we could share.
No, you've shared them, I
think
have them.
Maybe
Oh, okay.
Dr.
But I don't know that
Shafty
that
or
was-
Claudia can chime in on that?
Yeah, and Mrs. Wall, you can interrupt, but we had a subgroup of the work group that met, and we both collectively, Mrs. Wall and myself, took our lead from Dr. Warrior. So she crafted a vision for a data presentation, data protocols, the process of problem solving, and then we would meet. Mrs. Wall did a tremendous bit of work in a data presentation, and the group went slide by slide and asked wonderings and questions, and then I don't know what happened after, but then Dr. Moore or Dr. Warrior would meet, and then they would give direction based on what the group assessed. Where do we go next? And I took our lead from Dr. Moore, and then the other three members took the lead from Dr. Warrior.
And agenda creation was done with Mr. Knox. So Mr. Knox would have us in kind of facilitate a conversation between Dr. Warrior and myself. A lot of times he was just kind of on the call, and we collectively problem solved and said, this is what the agenda would be, had very similar protocols about the 7-day in advance and things like that. So I think you capture that, and then you capture the work that we're currently doing. That would be a way for the judge to say, although design has changed, and we're still in the process of creating our design, it isn't creating an illusion, we're not going to get hauled down to Miami again and scolded. Hope she doesn't watch this video. Scolded for not being in the work.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Like, I don't think the design has changed. I think we've actually taken a step back and went to create some foundational structure that both parties agree on, because you can look at data, but if you have not agreed to the metrics for the data, as we've seen in the last equity committee meeting, that if the district does not agree with the data, it doesn't matter what the committee determines, the district is going to fight the assessment. So what we've done here is said, okay, let's agree on some values, and then let's look at the data based on the values that we've agreed upon. So I wouldn't say like anything has changed. It's just more so being structured and ensuring we have a meeting of the minds before we even get into data.
And I 100% agree, and I think that's a great something to and I don't know how detailed you'd want to be, but as Mersan just shared it, a lot of the missteps or I forgot the word Mersan already used, the bait and switch kind of things happened because we didn't collectively agree on what these indicators were. So we're trying to prove to you this, that, and the other, and you're saying, well, that's not even what we want. I can't tell you how many times I've heard, whether it's Dr. Warrior or Claudia said, but who cares? So having those on the front end really is a sign of, okay, we've normed on what the indicator is. So when we get to the work, it may lead to completely different areas. As we look at an indicator, this is what we have, and I think the value of the conversation is this number or this indicator or behavior or system belief is in place, and really problem solve down to what we have to do to improve that indicator or organizational behavior. So it truly is problem solving, and that was the power. It was, and to be honest, it was a slow moving process. This will be, I know you want to do it today, this is still a slow moving process, but it is problem solving.
And having sat through both,
Can-
it was
can I-
different,
Can I add something to this conversation, please?
Absolutely.
Let's go back. Okay, there's an echo. It's really hard for me to communicate, but I'm going to. 2018 Joint Plan, Section 6 says, the goal of the school district's African American student academic achievement plan shall be to eliminate the achievement gap as compared to white students. So then, February document 227-1 has given the work group a purpose that the court agreed to, where we needed to identify the barriers, establish KPIs, expected outcomes, and the formats and structures of the data that we need in order to do the work. That was the reason why we agreed to focus on academics achievement to lay a foundation. It was a necessary foundational step that we needed to go through to see what the current state of student learning was in Indian River County. The problem became in June, where the natural step was to follow the order and start establishing KPIs and so forth, and the 5-month break began. So that's what I wanted to share based on my experience as a work group member is the initial meetings, the 2 meetings we had, May and June, were necessary to establish baselines on student achievement and what the achievement gap looks like before you start looking at sections of the joint. So there's no redesign or a different design, and so I was kind of confused about some of the conversation. To me, we were going in the right direction, and you can't establish progress unless you determine the state of the school district and you start with what we're tasked to do. And so
I think the redesign is just structurally, like we took our leads from our lead member, where now it's very legal heavy. So it feels, for us, it maybe redesign isn't the right word, but it feels different. This is a lot more formal than it was before, and that comes with pros and it comes with cons, but there's a different feeling to this. So maybe redesign was not the correct word, just because Dr. Moore would say, I met with Dr. Warrior, this is what's agreed upon, and by the time we got to the meeting, we took our directions from them.
So Shafty, Dr. Shafty, meeting with a mediator wasn't formal because instead of our attorneys, it was just George Knox. So that wasn't formal?
Not so much in our work group meetings, because he got us started with a team building activity, but then he took a step back. And it was a lot of work group members talking and based on their expertise, and that's where having these KPIs will be helpful, because the lens of expertise for some of those members was early childhood education, and you found the conversation gearing towards that. If we intensify our focus on pre-K, kindergarten, are we laying a foundation to help students succeed? So when you don't have the KPIs, because there was varying expertise in various areas of passion, you found like everybody kind of wanted to take on their passion project and see it through that lens. But I don't know what happened in the Dr. Moore, Dr. Warrior, Mr. Knox meetings, but in the work group meetings, he was an observer, really.
I was listening.
You heard that, Matt? You got to stop interjecting in our meeting and let us have fun.
But going back to Claudia, I think, Doc, you alluded to it, and with the KPIs, the goals, and objectives, it's now on the front end. And all of Dr. Warrior and Claudia's hard work would have been better able to be assessed and understood had that been a setup. Like you said, not a reorganization, but a more in-depth and informative look at the process. They were doing the work, but as you said, Dr. Shaft, everybody gravitated to what felt good to them. And kind of obliterated all other stuff, which all of it, when I met with Jody for the first time, and she met with the executive committee, they were profound in telling her we wanted every aspect of the joint plan. And that kind of got everybody doing their little thing, but they did a lot of hard work on the academic achievement, but it was not set up in a way where the fruits of their labor could manifest.
Agree.
I want to go to number 8.
So what's the best structure to begin to craft this report? the theory of action on how we scribe this story over the course of the last year. Without throwing blame one way or the other, just here are the factual information, and here's our goals for the upcoming school year, or whatever it is that we want to do for the upcoming year.
You only had 3 meetings, right?
I think it's been a total of,
April, May, June, January.
Yeah, because July, we didn't have one.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, a summary of those meetings and the fact of what your intent was, and kind of the fact that it was afforded the opportunity to manifest itself. But moving forward, we had to transition some kind of way. It needs to be talked about, but I don't think, because it was only 3 meetings.
I think you would share the meetings, the work group meetings. There were meetings with the mediator, myself, so there were a significant number of meetings, but formally put together, yeah, if it was 3, if that's what it was. I would be hesitant to say, this was the work that we did, and it was fruitful work. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. And now we've collectively agreed to not stop that work, but to build upon that work and really saying now we're going to do KPIs, or whatever we're calling them.
I agree with what Mershawn said. I don't think it's a different type of work. We're just kind of taking a step back to look at the real specifics with these, KPIs and so forth, because those 3 meetings, I know 3 meetings doesn't seem a long time, but there was work done, and it was good work. And as Ms. Wall said, we're looking at student achievement, trying to get into the beginning years of pre-K and K, but I don't think there's a real change, but concentration may be a little different because we're looking at those performance indicators. It's moving.
But
There were 4 meetings.
Were there 4,
Not 3.
Claudia?
I thought, yeah.
Uh-huh.
When did we
Yeah.
start? Was it April, May? I know we didn't have one in July. That's when Dr. Warrior was sick.
Yes, we had April, May, June. Nothing July, August, September, October, November, and then we met for the 4th time in December. And today's our 5th meeting, so.
I think we were.
Oh, no,
Don't
we were just talking about the other
talking
work
about the
group
first work group.
before we were work group
I'm
1.
sorry.
Oh, the first work group? Yeah, 3 meetings.
3 meetings,
Right.
yeah. I paying
and I think-
attention. Go ahead, Jody.
I mean, I think it's important to show what work was done in those initial meetings. I mean, I've seen what you all put together, and it was, it must have been, I've never done a 300-page PowerPoint, and I'm not suggesting that we send that to the court, but
No.
I think that
Oh,
it's,
she'd be mad about that.
yeah, but I do think it's important for her to see what the baseline
Yeah.
was and what you all were doing. It's not like that was, like you said, team building the whole time. It was, there was significant work that was accomplished there and has been since. So, I don't think that the judge is going to be disappointed with the work group in any way.
I agree, because I think Claudia and Dr. Warrior did a tremendous amount of, that's why I said a narrative, based on what occurred then. Because one of them that sticks in my mind that came out of that, and I mentioned it to Jody the other day in the email, is when I was able to understand that the Department of Education gives 2 grades to each school. Beachland can get an A for the overall school, but then a subgroup.
Within subgroups, correct.
That's powerful when the public understands who the subgroup is. It's your African-American students. So that coming out of y'all work, it was something that's just lodged, and I think that kind of stuff, if it's put and presented to the judge, that this is what we did. And
That was important.
yeah, that's powerful stuff. So, not to belittle it, but I think,
Not 2 grades if you're under 41% of the points, which would be a C.
yeah,
Each school is required for each of the subgroups, economically disadvantaged, Black, wherever you have over 10 students, to write specific action steps in their school improvement plan to address those areas.
Yeah.
But 41 is in fact the threshold of what would be the equivalent of a letter grade. So, yes, they do a letter grade for each subgroup, but it's not assigned a letter grade, it's just you have to do very specific action when it's under 41.
I think we can word it.
So will that draft be exchanged by council?
I
And
think it will have to be at this point through council.
Okay.
Because we won't have a meeting before January 30th.
Okay.
And we are where we did not want to be, but alas, here we are. So, yes, can we make a commitment to get you a draft by
We got 11 days,
The
12.
19th.
the 19th? How's Monday?
That's the 23rd.
We're busy that day, but Matt
Yeah.
can receive it that day.
Board meeting.
It's workshop and board meeting.
I'll give you my thoughts on it. The reporting obligation in document 227-1 is requesting an annual report detailing the district's progress in achieving full unitary status, which I don't think the group is ready to make that pronouncement just yet. But I agree with what everyone else has said. We can't give the court a bare bones report, or we'll get well, what my client said would happen. So, but I don't think it needs to be terribly lengthy, and I say that mostly out of concern for what happens if it's a 10-page document.
Because you've seen my writing before?
We are
Mine
going
too.
to, if it's a lengthy document, it's going to be hard to edit and agree before the deadline. So that would be my only thought is, maybe the goal is to give the judge enough information to satisfy what she's expecting from us, and then deferring the more detailed reporting for July 31 and January 15 of next year.
I fully anticipate a status conference.
I do too.
My thing was, with what we've said here, you have the foundation for that status report. Just incorporate the conversation, how we defined it, a narrative, bring up what was done, and not overload it. So, no, we ain't talking about no unitary status. We ain't gonna even bring that conversation up.
Yep.
This is where we are moving, trying to get on track to do what's right. And I think we're making steps in that direction. Where we at?
So it is, it's 6:50.
That one important one to do.
The two items I see left on the agenda, and please, anyone correct me if I'm wrong, is Section 2, Indicator 8, proposed revisions by the school district, and then item 6, set agenda for the February meeting.
Dr. Schaff, you want to share?
I think I shared it
You did.
to Matt with you guys.
Yes, we have
Okay.
a copy of it.
Okay.
I don't have it printed anywhere from my team, though.
Hi.
I don't know if you want to read it. Purposes of the record.
It's in a big packet.
And just so, just for the record, our, the initial proposal by the NAACP on this one was African-American teachers and instructional staff within the mentor program are renewed at the same rate as their white counterparts. That was the proposal.
Take one and pass it on, Jody. Did everybody get one?
Thank you.
So we're talking about indicator 8,
Yeah.
and we're looking at the district's response.
Yes.
Okay, and so she just read where we said the same rate as the white counterparts, but the district responds, by the end of the 22-23 academic year, the district will increase the retention rate for new African-American teachers by 5 percentage points. So in this instance, I'm not impressed with that because I discussed the ESE resource population, those teachers. So we had 75% of the black teachers that were non-renewed. And that means if we went up by 5%, it would only be 70% of those teachers. So you see where I see an issue with that.
The other issue, just looking at this, is we don't know a baseline.
Yes, and no baseline.
So 5% increase of.
Of what?
We're not clear on what that means. What that would mean in this context. And the other thing was, when I read this, was something that Dr. Moore mentioned at the last meeting, which was, don't want to retain people just for the purpose of retaining them.
I said that too.
So-
As a former principal, Mr. Browning and I in personnel, you want to do your best to keep the teachers you hire and support as much as you can, but sometimes it just doesn't work. And I asked as a principal, let's say I retain 10 white teachers, I have to retain 10 black teachers, or black teachers and white teachers, and one, they're just not qualified. So what do you do in that situation? I mean, I'm going to retain teachers for students and have the best teachers in that classroom. And I remember discussing it, and Mr. B said, it doesn't matter what culture, what race, they've got to be good for kids. So how do you?
What about the recommendation that I think Mershawn made last time, which was similarly situated?
Yeah.
Say that again?
Similarly situated, so you're retaining African-American and white teachers at the same rate based on their similar situation. Their rankings, the way they're evaluated is the same, their report cards, however you're, evaluating teachers is the same.
So basically, the concern in the last meeting was that saying at the same rate would then put the district in a position and force them to retain a poorly performing black teacher, and their white counterpart may be performing better, but for the same rate. Shafty said, what if we say highly effective, right? So she brought in what the evaluation would be for that teacher. So saying similarly situated, basically is saying African-American teachers and instructional staff within the mentor program are renewed at the same rate as their similarly situated white counterpart. So whether it is an evaluation that you're looking at to determine whether or not they're renewed, credentialing, just similarly situated allows you to look at the situation, the circumstances of each teacher, white teacher, black teacher, right? Both with satisfactory evaluations, both in second year, both teaching English. One is non-renewed, one is kept. It allows us to then look at that situation and determine on a deeper level the reasoning behind it, right? Because it speaks to equality, because now we're not looking at apples and oranges, we're comparing oranges and oranges. And we're doing similarly situated, so that could be two highly effective teachers or two teachers who are poorly performing. But it's not comparing two that are not equivalent to each other. It's basically comparing teachers on the same level, but of African American and white race.
So I hear there's additional information or concern for the NAACP on renewal of teachers? Non-renewals versus you're renewed. Who's being chosen to return? Is there
Right.
another place within, and this is an open question, within the joint plan to assess exactly what that concern is? Because it's not necessarily the mentoring program. It's a different concern.
See,
We
but
don't look at it that
mentoring
way.
speaks to support.
Yeah, we
So,
look at-
and that's, and
Go ahead,
that's
Michelle.
why, sorry. I'm sorry.
Start over, Michonne.
So mentoring speaks to support, and that's why we place it there. Because if a teacher in their first through third year is non-renewed, that means the district took the action and determined that this teacher is not employable in our district, and we have given them all the support that we can provide. So that's why we want it under mentoring. And
You're
it
not-
also sums
you're
up
not
1
capturing-
through 7, because if 1 through 7 is met, then these teachers will be renewed.
Sometimes, though, it's a whole different issue. They had 3 years to get certified, then we don't have a choice. They might be able to come back as permanent sub or something like that. Or, of course, if they leave on their own, we don't look at as not, at non-renewal, they would resign. But I'm sure, I guess I'm still not.
But if they're not certified, that's good, right? Because if they're not certified, then it wouldn't be an issue.
No,
under
it's
here,
not an
because
issue, but it's still
because
non-renewed.
it wasn't the district making
It's
the
still a
decision. It was the
non-renewed.
fact that they weren't certified. But it will also speak, though, that maybe there should be some support when it comes to assisting teachers with getting training so that they can get certified, or maybe we should not be hiring non-certified teachers if we don't have some type of pathway to assist with that.
I'll say that.
But this all speaks to support.
Non-renewal due to cert is increasing because the majority of our teachers are not College of Ed grads. So they enter the teaching profession, they have 600 hours of ESOL, they have how many hours of coursework. So I think that it doesn't change. I'm not trying to dissuade you, but I think the context of if you're going to teach K-3, you have to have reading endorsement, so you add the additional hours for that. My concern with non-renewal as a open qualifier is we have non-renewals due to certification, which we cannot employ.
And that's fine, long as you're not employing their white counterpart who also is not certified. That's the whole point of saying similar situated white counterpart. There's
We
no
can't hold
foul
anybody
if
on that.
both
What,
uncertified are treated the same.
But the rate could be impacted.
but what we're looking at is,
We say that's the same rate as they're similarly situated. So if a similarly situated white teacher is also being non-renewed because they're not certified, then what's the problem? There is no problem.
what we look at, if we go into a situation like Kevin and I went into, and you can see where this African-American person is being non-renewed, but was part of a mentoring program that did not address their needs. It is a correlation between the two. We can say that mentoring has nothing to do with retention, but in our spirit of our observations and our knowledge, boots on the ground, interfacing, talking with teachers, talking with people, there is a true correlation between what is done in mentoring. I've gone through all of you all's mentoring manuals, and it is good verbiage, but I'm stuck with practical application. Because if I was putting it out there for show, oh my God, it's off the chain.
There you go.
But then, when you put it in what Kevin and I saw, where people are being non-renewed in a program they've only been in for a year, where they were supposed to have been supporting and mentoring, and then we find out that the process of mentoring was used to evaluate, but evaluate them in a negative way. So there's a pathway, and we want it put in there It's not a stretch, Dr. Moore. Yeah, it could be put over in 100 other places, but we see it where if your African-American teachers are not mentored and kicked to the curb, there's a problem. And that's what we saw, and that's why we feel that there has to be, in the baseline as was brought up, and the other thing is instructional, when we start defining terms, you know, teachers versus instructional. I remember some years ago, we had a conversation relative to that same thing, what was instructional, what was teachers,
Right.
where these people who was taking care of these kids with mental problems, were they teachers, were they instructional? So, but, yeah, we are strong on this thing that number 8 is very powerful for the totality of 1 through 7.
I think you're very strong on ensuring that a teacher, black teacher, same scenario as a white teacher, is renewed at the same rate. 70% of our teachers are annual contract. So of that 70%, maybe 8% of them are in a mentoring program.
But this one says within the mentor program, just.
I'm just
Okay. I just wanted-
saying,
Yeah, I understand.
in the scenario that we're vaguely discussing, some of those individuals not even in the mentoring program. So I don't know if there's a different way of capturing it. And I'll give you another example. My concern isn't those numbers. Those numbers are what those numbers are. We give you those numbers, and that's y'all come to my office meeting, or it's somewhere else, and discuss that. There's a bill that was just filed today, which could drastically shift what public education looks like, drastically reduce the number of teachers. And by school, if I lose X number of kids, I lose X number of teachers. I just can't afford to have them anymore. So I'm going to lose 12. And the decision-making process goes to certification, experience. So there are opportunities with the data set. There's other things that have influence on the data in which something could be, or an opinion could be made, or interpretation could be made that you're disproportionately releasing black teachers, when the reality is, no, I lost 1,000 kids. Or there's other things in which we're just making a decision not to renew that we just can't share. Professional standards, this issue, that issue. I agree you have a concern that you want a validation that all things the same. You go through the mentoring program, enrollment stays the same. There's not a fluctuation of certification. That teacher is continued to be entitled to a job. I just don't know that this is there's too many other factors that come into play that could put the district in a position in which I'm trying to defend something. So like, oh no, but it's this, or oh, but it's that. And that goes back to filibuster. Oh, you're trying to explain it away. I'm just trying to, I don't know what the data number is. I know what you want, and I want to give you that. I know exactly what your concern is, and I know what it is. I just don't think this captures it. I'll give you more. I'll give you less. Tell me where to put it. But this is putting us in a situation in which other factors come into influence that may not accurately assess what we're trying to assess.
In a perfect world.
But it doesn't though, right? Because that's the whole language of similarly situated, whether it is professional standards or the amount of students that was taken from the school. All we're looking at is saying, okay, so was similarly situated white counterparts treated the same manner? Because it speaks to more than just you all retaining them. It speaks to the environment. It speaks to equal treatment of white and black teachers in the same situation. It also speaks to how hard it is to hire black teachers that you all talk about all the time.
I do, yep.
And so, and we want to ensure in the first 1 through 3 years that the mentoring program is sufficient in providing enough support that the district isn't deciding to non-renew them.
Can I,
You know?
I don't disagree with anything you just said. Can I make a recommendation? Let us take another stab at it, and I'll do 2 things.
But what you're giving us is a measurement, not an indicator. When you say we're going to increase it by 5%, that's a measurement. That's not an indicator.
Well, if, as you said, if 1 through 7 is in place, if there's a measurement indicator, it should be fine. And so my recommendation, let us take another stab at creating what the indicator is that addresses the intent of this conversation, and let me provide other data around retention in itself, or non-renewals, because I think they're 2 different things. I think I can give you more around the area of non-renewals, which maybe it doesn't fit anywhere, or maybe or it does, and also get something, and maybe I can work with Rashawn on other language, so what's similar, what that means, because maybe it's a little vague. That would be my recommendation. Let me, in good faith, let me come back, and if Rashawn's okay, just a 10-minute conversation around similar, I would like to describe that out.
Yeah, me too.
I just want to be comfortable that we're assessing exactly what's being.
You want to define the factors that are going to be considered with similarly situated.
And
Like
if the way
whatever
Rashawn
factors
says
you-
it, I don't disagree with it, but I want to process it and put it in a statement.
I would recommend that, in our proposed language, that the word similarly situated, which you're going to take a stab at defining some factors that you're going to take into consideration, that the word similarly situated would be put between their and white counterparts. So same rate as their, comma, similarly situated white counterparts, and then you'll.
I just like a little, it says similar situated, little asterisk, and what that is, because I don't want there to be any, well, that's not similarly situated, that's completely different. I just,
Right.
Yeah.
and I think we could do that,
Exactly.
and I think we're close. That's my only hiccup is, what's kicking me, is that we norm on that. I think I could do that with Rashawn, but I don't want to excuse away the elephant in the room, which is the renewal,
The goal is to make sure the mentor program is
Yeah,
working.
works.
But
Correct.
that's-
So how do
Yes.
you
The goal is-
measure,
Well, that's this
And that goes-
indicator.
yeah.
There is another concern, which is when we go to do renewals, that it's being done in the best interest of children.
Right.
And we're only looking
Always.
at who's in the best service of children and not the color of someone's skin.
I understand from
You know,
your,
I want to go back to that.
Rashawn.
Hold on, hold on now. Okay, honey.
Go ahead.
I understand from your viewpoint of not having to keep someone who, regardless of what color, maybe they're not working out. And in a perfect world, that's it. But I think we had an understanding that at 50 years, this is not the perfect world. This is the place that we are still trying to fix. At the beginning of this year, how many teachers, African American, were at Citrus Elementary? 2. What were their names? How long have they been there? I can tell you at least 15 years. So if I'm going to, that would be Broxton, and it would be,
Sister.
no, not her sister. There's another lady. It'll come back to me. But she's been there a long time. So that tells me that there was no effort by either the principal or somebody to mentor or retain the African American teachers that came through that school. How many schools have 2 or less black teachers today? And we've been working on this. This is year number 4 in equity, in equity or work group, right, Rashawn? So there are some schools that have less than 2, maybe even 1. Is there a school with 0? Is-
There used to be.
We don't know. So
But you know, that's what the joint plan says, which was so,
from 1994, it said at least 2 black teachers at every
but
school.
2018 said 1, right?
No, see, y'all take that out
No,
of
don't take,
context.
I'm not, I know, I'm just trying to
The
say it's
judge
right.
told us that they could not do quotas, that he'd get kicked to the curb if we put a quota in that joint plan. But that if the Indian River County School District, NAACP sat down, which Mashawn tried it, and say, we want 10 black teachers per school and agree to it, it is not a quota. It's an agreement. So it was, we were forced into that, putting it.
All right, that's fine. I just, I remember when I read
Endeavor
it.
to do one. Yes,
I
let me,
didn't like it.
let me
I didn't
land
like
this
it.
plane.
Sorry, Rick.
1994,
I remember.
at least 2 per school. We're still at the same rate.
Yep.
So in the perfect world, I can see what you're saying. But we have schools, and we've discussed multiple times, where all of your black teachers left out of that middle school that's out west. Right? So there was something wrong with either the administration or the mentoring.
That's
So
what it goes
until we
back
get
to,
those pieces
mentoring,
in
yeah.
place, I don't think we can say up 1%, up 5%, up. It needs to be the same. The culture needs to change. If it were the people around this table in charge of the hiring, we'd have no issue probably. More than likely, no issue. But you still have some mindsets that are going to create cliques, are going to create whatever it is that's going to make it a not so good environment for minority teachers. And we
And
can't
that's
overlook
important.
that. That is a major part.
And we're in trouble in this nation, I say it all the time. 1970, 33% of American graduates in colleges in America were in college of education. Now it's less than 10%. Of that 10%, we have maybe 10% African American. So yeah, we have to do a better job there, 100%. And it comes down to 1 through 7. I know that. The right mentor and the principal support.
Mm-hmm.
And now, with what Mershawn said, and I probably like to ask Dr. Moore if I could help with that, when we talk about the similar situation, I've got to look at, is that what it was?
Similarly situated, yes.
I think-
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And anyway, that term, in my mind is spinning on that one. So I'm understanding that. I've just got to look at it and see it with you. And
To include these factors, and that's
Right,
not the
right.
only
I think
inclusive
that's-
factor.
and
I've got to.
If we can do that, I think we can take care of that indicator.
Indicator 8.
And we all would be happy with that, and it's assessing, from a systems perspective, it's assessing exactly what we want it to assess.
Right.
I don't,
So I would,
I don't,
go ahead.
I just want to say, the percent of African-American teachers has improved drastically over the last 3 years. Are there schools in which we need to take another look? But the intent to grow the numbers, it is growing. And I think I'm not trying to dispute your concerns. I think they are in fact concerns, but we also have to acknowledge there is a system in place to grow the number.
Yeah.
There's still work to do. I just don't want to represent that the team.
And there,
I'll be honest with you, it's so much harder now to hire any teacher than 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
Look at the.
And you-
I don't care what color you are.
They're leaving.
No one's going to want to go to public education
They're
with the
leaving.
things that are happening in Florida.
no, and you have your African-American teachers that are more comfortable, and they know who's going to treat them fair. You have, I could name, Mr. Seymour went out to talk to some of them at Storm Grove. They know where they were going to get fair treatment. They know that when Tasha got moved over to Citrus, I need to go follow Tasha because I don't know what's going to happen here. And I hate to put those names out here on the table, but but to be real and understand it, we know what's happening. And I know these people, and I work with all of them, and I can step into any place, and we'll have a respectful conversation, black or white. And I've hired more, probably than, maybe with the exception of you, Doc. in my career hiring more people, white, black, and all, and treating them with respect. And we still have that issue here, which makes this indicator
Very important.
very important.
I think Rashawn has something to say.
You still there?
She's politely raised her hand.
Sorry.
And I just want to go back to like when Dr. Moore is saying about, when he talks about, oh, I don't want to do this or that because of race, but we have a whole desegregation order because of race. And that's why we're here tonight, because of race, because of how those folks are treated. And we really have to be honest about the climate culture of the district. And people have been promoted because of race, because the leadership likes them, because they're a good fit. And people have not been promoted because they were not liked or because of race. So let's not pretend like we're asking for anything that is out of the norm other than making the playing field even for everyone, regardless of race.
I think it's important, too, that we consider all of the factors involving recruitment and retention. I was looking at Beth's budget today and what she's putting into recruitment. It's a lot goes into it, and she does a pretty good job. Not to say that it's neither here nor there, and it can be changed, but we need to consider those factors when we try and recruit good teachers, and black, white, but the focus needs to be on the process. So I don't think we can even discuss many of these factors without determining what goes into recruiting great teachers.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
All right, I'll reach out.
thank you.
Thank you for, getting that information, especially what Mershawn said, because it has my mind thinking there.
Mm-hmm.
What's the next item on the agenda? So are we okay with me problem solving that and bring it back? Okay.
Give it a stay.
What did he say?
Don't kill it.
No, no.
You got that.
Okay.
Last item I see is the February meeting agenda.
Okay. Can we work on KPIs?
Yes, can we also finish, not just indicator 8, but section 2? I think Matt had brought up a good point that we need the measures and the, I forgot what you said in your email, but whatever else is on the metrics. Metrics and what is on 227?
I said that?
Yeah, in one of our emails, you said we need to close out section 2.
So do we vote on
Yeah,
it?
I didn't think about metrics. I think I might have been thinking about indicator 8.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood.
Metrics is a word my clients use more so than me.
But measurements, metrics, whatever you want to call it.
You okay?
My schedule.
Dr. Claudia.
So Jody, we couldn't approve 1 through 7, memorialize it, or did we already do that?
I think we already did.
It's
Okay.
done.
All right, so we just had to bring indicator 8 back.
I think it's indicator 8,
Indicator 8.
section 3, KPIs. Kind of follow.
Yeah, let's do section 3 KPIs.
So we'll put that as a discussion item, for February. We'll
Sounds
bring
good.
back, this is so technical, section 2, indicator 8 for consent in February.
Right.
And then for discussion, move into KPIs for sections 3 and 4, time willing.
And to be clear, I see nodding on the other side, but I want to make sure it's understood. If there's not agreement ahead of time
Right.
on section 2, indicator 8, then any member of the work group could say, I want to pull that from the consent agenda and move it to the regular agenda where it can be discussed.
I now understand. Thank you for your patience with that.
No,
This is not in my wheelhouse.
No, look, I think
So-
we're all, dabbling in things that are not necessarily our regular day-to-day jobs, so.
But sorry to bring it back, but I think it is important, and it's something that Dr. Shafty was bringing up a lot during the last work group meeting, was like trying to drill down on what are the measures for it. She's like, okay, what do I need to show you to show that I've successfully achieved indicator 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think measures are an important area that we need to close out on all of the sections as we go through them, but as it relates to section 2 as well, so that we agree on the indicators, but then we know how to measure the success. And I don't know where this comes in, but the work group order does contemplate barriers to achievement. So I don't know if that's something that you review before the data, after the data. Claudia, if you have any positions on that, feel free to jump in.
So let me ask you
Yeah,
this. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay. My suggestion is going forth to other sections is premature until the section 2 is completed. And that is accomplishing everything for section 2 that is required of the work group, from identifying the barriers, defining the KPIs, outcomes, and the parameters for the data. So that's just a suggestion I'm throwing out to our group and for feedback.
Could the work group endeavor to do that for section 2 and then also put on the agenda the indicators for 3, recognizing the limited time that the work group has to get together?
I think that's fine.
And I'd like to add, if we can get through section 2 successfully, it'll serve as a good model for our direction for the other sections. To get, familiar with what's required of us as work group members on section 2, from beginning to end, the finish line, and then use that as a model.
Just not, and I don't know how you would feel about this, Claudia, but indicators we have, go back, what do you call them now, the metrics, what do you call them? Measures. The measures, we identify the measures, then we have the conversation around where are we at? We're not there yet. Then you define the barrier. I think the barrier and just natural problem-solving processes, go through, take the time that is needed, create the indicator, the measures, present the assessment, I guess, of the measures, and then problem solve around, okay, if it's not there, then what are the barriers? I think the only way to say where we have barriers is to do an assessment of where we're currently at. So I think maybe if we had the indicators, KPIs, and the measures for each of the different sections, that's more work than we've ever done. And then we go back and say, all right, now let's engage in the conversation around the measures to line up to the indicators. And when we collectively say, all right, there's more work need to be done, then that's when the magic happens. That's when we say, all right, what's the barrier keeping us from getting there? And what's our collective plan on supporting in the community, in the schools, perception, whatever it may be. That's where the problem solving really, this is where this becomes magic. That would be my recommendation is, I agree with, get KPIs, get the measures with each of the different areas, and then engage in the dialogue to determine where barriers exist and capture what those barriers are. And the future work of the group would be, all right, now that we have this barrier, what are we going to do collectively to eliminate or reduce that barrier?
You were saying, Kevin?
So would we share the measures we're using before the next meeting? And then that gives us a starting point?
Yeah.
Okay,
We would exchange them, you would have suggestions,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
would
yeah.
have suggestions. Okay.
just so we kind of can get it going before we all come.
So we're not reading them for the first time in the meeting.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you want us to draft something first, or do you want to draft something first?
I think
From-
exchanging might be, yeah.
Like we're both going to do it and then swap papers?
And then what now?
Sorry,
Okay.
teacher hat, like
But should we-
swap.
We can take turns. I mean, we can take the measures. It's something that we've been working on, so we're happy to send you a draft of the measures that we think might work, and then you can send us your feedback on them or add things or put things on for discussion.
And we'll capture everything in track changes.
Right.
Everybody's
Yeah, that's
comfortable with that?
perfect.
Okay.
What about compliance targets? What are your thoughts
Say that
on
again.
Say that again?
I'm sorry, yeah, compliance targets. What are your thoughts on that? Let's say for section 2.
I'm not really clear on what a compliance.
Give us an example.
target is.
We're all looking at each other.
Well, based on the KPI that you set, you're going to set targets towards, I'm always looking at the finish line with the school district. What does it look like at the finish line to where the work group says compliance? So what that finish line is for a KPI, set targets along the way to see if you are making progress towards the finish line. If that you're meeting these targets along the way.
Right.
That's what I'm suggesting here, be built in as well.
Like on indicator 3, all mentors participate in the mentor program on a voluntary basis and undergo clinical ed training. Our target's 100%. Right now, we're at 92, something like that.
Did you hear
Right,
that?
so basically what she's saying is even if you may not have compliance in that area, but you can say, okay, you know, we haven't met where our end goal, but we have increased by this much, or we have like developed our program and it now does this, you know. So it's what Dr. Moore was speaking of earlier. It still shows progress because you're hitting compliance targets, even if it's not like, yay, you know, we're at the finish line. It's still like something that we can report to the judge that progress is being made because this target was met, you know.
Correct, and agree to that as a work group. Both parties agree to these targets, be very specific, because what you might, in the past, what I've noticed is that what you may feel is progress may not be progress to the other party. So if you put that in writing, what these targets are specifically towards the finish line, then I think things are going to go a lot smoother. And if you stick to section 2 and get it done first, as far as laying it out from beginning to end with this model, then the rest of the sections, as the work group works on the rest of the section, it'll be more familiar, and the expectations will have already been agreed to as far as structure, format.
Okay.
Target sounds
And district
huge.
staff won't feel like they're doing work and not being recognized for it because they'll be hitting targets that we've agreed upon that will show that they are making efforts.
So targets sound future-driven, so I think that's important. And then we also embed the judge's historical anchor year she wanted from 1994. So I think we are future-driven while looking at where we have been historically. And that way we acknowledge her request to look at information in those years she requested.
But Dr. Shafty, her example only referred to section, if I remember right, 4, 6, and 7. With those timeframes?
Her example is like that, but the transcripts from the status conference said she prepared that for us and to mirror along the way because of the amount of information we were giving her.
Okay.
I think that would help, Doc, with something you said. Show us we're doing something.
Well, and that's, because I've said a number of times that this work is not 2 years down the road, it's not 3 years down there, it's 25 years down the road. So it
And
kind
continuous.
of goes back to something Doc says, we're not there yet. But
So,
when you hit a target, you know, that target in my mind may be a target I know is going to be 10 years down the road.
Yeah.
So how do you move the system forward and get it into policy and memorialize the work where it's not,
Sorry, Doc.
unitary status is not 10 years down the road. It could be 3 years down the road, but there's still another 25 years to do the work. And that's, that's, you know, I don't want to set my fear is to set a target to say we've done this.
Yeah, that's why I said targets can keep moving, and we're doing pretty well,
Yeah.
we can do better, you know?
Yeah.
I'll process through that.
Okay.
So I have the agenda as Section 2, Indicator 8. Right now, it's in the consent agenda.
Right.
And the action items, measures and compliance targets for Section 2, presumably all indicators for Section 2. And then if time permits, Section 3 KPIs for next week.
And the meeting minutes.
In the meeting minutes,
Dun, 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 dun.
and the agenda for the March meeting. And if everybody agrees, we'll just make that a standing agenda
Yeah.
item. Missing anything?
Well captured.
Well, ideally, we also approve these minutes.
Yep, yeah, that's what,
Oh, December 14th and these
yeah,
minutes.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Just-
Yeah, depending on how we feel about those, maybe we can agree to put those in the consent agenda. And what I'll do in the interim is get you the name of the group we use
Yeah,
for
yeah,
the core
yeah.
reporter.
That's my homework. So we don't have a gavel, but meeting adjourned, right? Hold
on,
you guys.
hold on.
Oh, sorry,
7:34.
7:34.
Thank you, and
All right,
drive
that's pretty
safe.
good.
Thank you. Apologize